Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game, and I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just for along for the ride.
And today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Sauron's Reach, the encounter set from the core set. And so Sauron's Reach has 4 cards in it, just 4 cards. And so it's got the Eastern Crows, but there's 3 copies of the Eastern Crows. There's Evil Storm, which is 3 copies of the Evil Storm, Pursued by Shadow, a Treachery. There's 2 copies of that. And then Treacherous Fog, there's 2 copies of that. And so in terms of dealing with these encounter cards, I'll tackle the Eastern Crows, or at least start the conversation there, because that's the one enemy in this encounter set. And I think the Eastern Crows are just annoying as all get out. I'm just not... They're super easy to get rid of. They have very little in the way of threat that they add to the staging area, but they keep recurring. It seems like there's always like 10 or 12 copies of them in the deck, in the encounter deck, because whenever they're defeated, they get to go back into the encounter deck. They don't get discarded. And so the only way to get rid of them is by using their shadow effect, which their shadow effect isn't horrible. It's just an attack buff to the attacker, but still, like, this is the card that was designed to just never go away. What do you think?
It's more of a troll card than an actual "I'm going to be mean to you" card. The only problem with it is the surge effect. Because in the encounter deck, in the overall decks that this card's in, you've got some nasty enemies that it could surge into, and that's the only problem that it really causes. Other than it gets shuffled back into the encounter deck, so you can't actually get rid of it, there's no real harm in it. I generally just leave it there attacking me turn after turn, because with only one attack, it's not going to do much damage, and it just sends the shadow effects out of the deck.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you leave it in the staging area, the shadow effect isn't going to be there. But
I generally leave it engaged with me, so I'm getting attacked, so I can just discard the shadow effects.
Oh, right. I got you.
So it thins the deck, so you can got more chance of getting rid of, say, the Hill Troll by shadow effect, or Chieftain Utak by shadow effect.
Right. I got it. And which is a great strategy that a lot of seasoned players use, is because of the game, it's designed so well, so you can get rid of cards from the encounter deck in a lot of ways. What about Treacherous Fog?
Treacherous Fog.
I mean, so each location gets +1 threat, which is fine, but that. I don't know why in the beginning there was that 35, why 35 threat, or at least in all of these cards, why 35 threat is the threshold.
Yeah, other than the 35 threat discard, none of these effects really bother me, because I'm generally sitting just below 35 threat. I'm either sitting on the 30 mark or well below it, depending on what deck I'm running. So the only one I really consider is semi-nasty is the Pursued by Shadow, which, when revealed, each player raises a threat by 1 for each character he controls that is not currently committed to the quest.
If you're using like a Dwarf Swarm deck or an Outlands deck where you have a bunch of characters out, and then this comes out, you can raise your threat by a ton. Especially in the Nightmare. I've recently got into running Nightmare versions of these core set in the first cycle, and this particular card is nasty in the Nightmare scenario.
Yeah, and its shadow effect isn't much better After defending player chooses and returns one exhausted ally he controls to its owner's hand. If he controls no exhausted allies, raise your threat by 3. So that in itself can cause some issues if you don't have exhausted allies.
Right. Now, the good news is this is all really easily taken care of by a test of will, or
yes, most of these cards are easily dealt with by a test of will. Not that you really would so much, because of the fact that Evil Storm's not really going to do much damage unless they're over 35. The same with Treacherous Fog.
I guess with just Evil Storm, it's almost like they were predicting swarm decks, because to do 1 damage to each character. Now, a dwarf swarm deck, dwarves typically have more than 1 hit point, but in Outlands and some of the elf swarm decks, you end up with a lot of 1 hit point characters out there. So that can be, the Evil Storm can be devastating if you're not managing your threat.
Well, exactly, but most seasoned players generally know what the encounter deck holds, so they manage their threat accordingly.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that these 4 cards of the encounter sets that we've looked at, these 4 cards are really kind of a softball in general. I don't think that there's much that's really horrible out there with these cards. I actually prefer these cards to come off in the setup phase, like with the exception of the crows. A lot of times in the setup phase, you have to reveal an encounter card, and then to get Evil Storm or Pursued by Shadow in the setup, it's phenomenal, because then you don't even have to worry about it.
Another good trick with the crows, so to stop the surge, is run Phelan and have them commit to the quest. Obviously, it doesn't do anything for setup, but if it comes out during questing, it's another way to dispose of them. It comes out, the damage is dealt before the keyword is triggered.
I don't have really much more to say about this encounter set. It's kind of a softball in terms of the counter sets that are out there, so how about you?
Agreed. It is probably, out of the encounter sets we've done, it's probably the biggest softball that we've had
right.
so far.
And what's the next encounter set we're going to talk about?
The next encounter set is Journey Along the Anduin, where we get to see some more of our friends from the encounter set.
Sounds like fun. Okay, so join us next time as we talk about Journey Along the Anduin. See you later, everybody.